I'm so honored to be here to represent the Damer family and remember Mr. Vernon Damer Sr.
Creative over 60, still shining, still so risky, living out the story I was meant to write.
You know, I've always said that Mr. Vernon was a man before his time because he was so progressive, innovative, resilient, and determined in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Someone said, oh no, he wasn't a man before his time, but he really was. Because to have the vision that he had at that time in history with Jim Crow laws, his vision was amazing. I dreamt of writing my nonfiction picture book biography of Mr. Vernon for about 20 years. Because of who he was, I felt it was important that young people know about this extraordinary man. Guys, I couldn't imagine not telling his story. I couldn't imagine young people not knowing about his sacrifice. But let me just tell you just a little bit about that night that their lives were changed forever. It was January the 9th, 1966. Mr. Vernon and his wife Ellie Jewell, they had been sleeping in shifts because his life had been threatened, and so they slept in shifts. But on January the 9th, things had been quiet, so they went to bed that night. Their children were there. 4 of their sons were serving in the military. About 2 o'clock in the morning, Miss Ellie Jewell, who was 101 and still very active in her sorority and church, she told me, she said, I heard something outside, and I said, Vernon, I think they got us. He jumped up, grabbed his gun, because he always had his gun nearby, and he ran to the family room, and there was fire because they had thrown a firebomb into their house. So there was fire, there were bullets coming at him, and he was shooting, trying to get his family out. He said, Ellie, take the kids out the back. And so because he stood at that window and he was shooting and trying to defend his family, they were able to get out the back. But he was there in that fire and in that smoke. And because he was injured. Now, he was able to defend the family, and they were able to get out, and they were able to make it to the hospital. And he was severely injured, and their 10-year-old daughter was severely burned also. And so a Hattiesburg American reporter, that's our local newspaper, came in to interview Mr. Vernon. And he said something like, do you think it was worth it? And Mr. Vernon said, on his deathbed, in this society, if you don't vote, you don't count. That was on his deathbed. And not long after that, he took his last breath. He was a husband, father, businessman, deacon, landowner, and farmer, and civil rights activist, and so much more. In his community, he set the stage for social justice and equality because he became interested in social justice early in his life. Even though he was living in Jim Crow laws, which were extreme segregation and laws that tried to keep black folks from moving forward, but Vernon did not allow those societal norms in that day to keep him from planning and achieving his goals. Believe it or not, going out, doing book festivals and book events, I have met people who knew of Vernon or their families knew of Vernon, and they talk about what a kind man he was how he helped people. In the 1950s and 60s, Vernon had a grocery store in his community. He had a sawmill. His family hauled timber, grew crops. He was the first man in his community to have a tractor. In some of the interviews when I was working on my book, I was told that he would take his tractor out to help other farmers get ready for planting season. He looked after his neighbors, white or black, and he helped when he could. And people still remember that. But one of his main passions was for everyone to become a first-class citizen and have voting rights. He wanted to be able to walk into the circuit clerk's office and cast his vote. And my father-in-law, Vernon David Jr., he says that his dad had a thirst for equality that he saw in the 1940s. Vernon Sr. was a member of the NAACP. He would go on to become a president for the NAACP because his desire was to vote. And his desire was for everyone, regardless of your race, to have the desire to vote. So every year he would go out, he would pay his poll taxes, which was $2. He would pay his poll taxes, and then he would go in and he would try to vote. And my father-in-law said that they would give him the card to read something, and he said his dad was smart, but whatever he said, they were going to strike it down. But he never gave up. He never gave up. But after trying numerous times, he was finally allowed to register in 1965 following the passage of the Voting Rights Act. But Vernon never saw it come to fruition. He was murdered at the age of 57 years old by the White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan on January the 10th, 1966. And his registration card would come about a week or so after his funeral. He left behind his wife, Miss Ellie Joel, and his children, and the family would fight for justice for years. Miss Ellie would testify over 70 times about that tragic night. However, true justice would not come until the Grand Wizard was convicted in Hattiesburg, Mississippi in 1998. I told you that Mr. Vernon said on his deathbed that in this society, if you don't vote, you don't count. He believed that until his dying day. He sacrificed his life so others could have the right to vote. But I want to tell you that Mr. Vernon, he inspired people. He can still inspire people today to social justice, because we can look at his legacy, not just as history, but as a roadmap to a life of justice. First, he represents bravery and resilience. That's pretty hard to replicate, but I know we can do it. Second, a life of justice needs to be built on everyday access, community spaces where you are, which is how Mr. Vernon lived his life. He created a community in Kelly Settlement, and he would invite others to his home and try and get them to, be strong and be brave and get out there and do what you had to do to promote civil rights and social activism. He was very much into economic empowerment and social justice. He was willing to help others. So if you can help others, then it may not be financially, it may be just by picking them up and taking them through the poll. But I want to tell you, we have social media, and so we have a tremendous way that Mr. Vernon didn't have to bring others to social justice.